What if I told you that one of the most powerful religious artifacts in history is still hidden somewhere on Earth right now? And what if the reason governments, churches, and international organizations are actively preventing anyone from finding it is because they know exactly what it is, and they're terrified of what happens if it's exposed? If that sounds like fiction to you, then what you're about to hear will change your understanding of history forever. This isn't speculation. These are documented events, verified accounts, and real people whose lives were destroyed trying to uncover this truth. If you want to know what they don't teach in textbooks like this video immediately, subscribe to Hidden Reality. Hit that notification bell, because what I'm about to reveal has been suppressed for thousands of years. The philosophy of sealed mysteries. We tend to think we understand the world we live in. We assume the age of true mystery is over. We believe that danger now belongs only to movies and cinema. Carefully framed, safely distant, fading when the screen goes dark. In reality, we assume the unknown can always be measured, contained, and explained through science and logic. But history keeps a completely different record. A record filled with places where work simply stopped. Doors opened just far enough to see inside, then closed immediately because what followed wasn't discovery. It was sickness. It was silence. It was objects cataloged and then removed from discussion entirely. There are rooms that were detected but never entered. Ancient texts that were translated and then locked away. These are not myths. These are moments when human curiosity met an absolute limit, and the people closest to those limits reached the same conclusion. Some things are not dangerous when they remain hidden. They become dangerous the moment they are exposed to the world. Tutankhamun's Tomb. The Curse That Wasn't. Valley of the Kings, Egypt. November 1922. When archaeologist Howard Carter looked through that first small hole into Tutankhamun's tomb, he made a statement that would echo through history. He said he saw wonderful things. He was looking at the antechamber, the outer waiting room of death itself. Beyond it stood a sealed doorway marked with ancient stamps of authority. And beyond that sealed door was the burial chamber itself, untouched for more than 3,000 years. But here is what most people don't realize when they hear this story. They never fully opened it. The stone sarcophagus was opened. The nested coffins were examined. The golden mask was removed and shown to the entire world. But the deepest, most sacred layers of the burial remained documented, then left completely alone, preserved exactly as they were originally found. The official explanation was preservation. Open-air exposure, the archaeologists claimed, could cause irreversible damage to materials sealed since ancient times. But Carter's own private writings suggest something far more complicated was happening behind the scenes. Within weeks of the tomb's opening, Lord Carnarvon was dead. A mosquito bite became infected, leading to fatal complications while he remained in Cairo. Not long after, Arthur Mace, one of Carter's closest assistants, fell seriously ill and died. Then Richard Bethel, Carter's secretary, was found dead under circumstances that remained unclear. A French scientist who had visited the excavation site also died soon afterward. And later, Bethel's father died following a personal tragedy that newspapers quickly folded into the growing narrative. In total, 13 people connected to the excavation died within 7 years. Different causes, different locations, but all shared one critical link: direct involvement with Tutankhamun's tomb. The press gave it a name: the Pharaoh's Curse, a story that sold headlines around the world. Publicly, Carter dismissed the idea as absurd. Privately, his journals tell a much quieter, far darker story. He wrote about feelings of being watched, about a presence that felt stronger the closer he got to the sarcophagus. He recorded unexplained illnesses among workers, fevers that appeared and vanished without explanation, skin infections, breathing problems that defied medical understanding. Medical records from the early 1920s suggest several team members may have suffered unusual fungal infections, conditions doctors at that time struggled to identify or treat. Carter himself became increasingly cautious. He began wearing a protective mask when entering the tomb, not just for dust, but for something he never officially named in any report. Today, scientists believe they understand what was actually happening. In 1999, A German researcher named Gotthard Kramer studied sealed Egyptian tombs and identified long dormant molds and bacteria capable of surviving for millennia in completely enclosed spaces. When disturbed, these organisms can become airborne. When inhaled, they trigger severe infections, respiratory failure, or systemic illness, sometimes weeks after initial exposure. It wasn't a curse. It was biology. But the story doesn't end there. In 2015, ground-penetrating radar scans revealed something completely unexpected behind the northern wall of Tutankhamun's burial chamber. Empty spaces, possibly 2 hidden rooms. Rooms that had never been opened by grave robbers, by Carter's team, or by anyone else in recorded history. The scans suggested the presence of organic materials and metal objects inside these sealed chambers. Egypt's Ministry of Antiquities announced plans to investigate. Press conferences were held. International experts volunteered. Then quietly, the entire project stopped. No further testing. When asked why, officials said the readings were inconclusive. But other accounts told a different story. Reports attributed to internal communications mentioned biological concerns and contamination risks. One line stood out. If limited exposure in the outer chambers coincided with multiple fatalities, we cannot predict the risk posed by spaces that have remained completely sealed. A former team member later spoke anonymously to a journalist. According to him, the decision came down to one word: uncertainty. We don't know what's in those rooms, he explained, and no one wants to be responsible for releasing it. The Copper Scroll. The Treasure Map. Kamun, West Bank. March 1952. A Bedouin shepherd was exploring caves near the Dead Sea when he discovered something that would change everything we thought we knew about ancient treasure. Among the Dead Sea Scrolls, ancient Jewish texts hidden in desert caves over 2,000 years ago, one scroll stood completely apart. While the others were written on animal skin or papyrus, this one was hammered out of pure copper. And while the others contained religious texts, prayers, and prophecies, this one contained something entirely different. A treasure map. Not just any treasure map. The Copper Scroll lists 64 locations where massive amounts of gold, silver, and sacred items were believed to be hidden. We're not talking about a few coins or jewelry. The scroll describes tons of precious metals, bars of gold, vessels of silver, sacred objects from the temple. Enough wealth to fund a small army or rebuild an entire nation. The problem was immediate. The scroll was too fragile to unroll. The copper had corroded and fused together over 2,000 years. If anyone tried to open it by hand, it would crumble to dust. In 1955, a British scientist named Wright Baker came up with a solution. He built a special saw designed to cut the scroll into thin strips, like slicing a loaf of bread. Strip by strip, they cut it open. Strip by strip, they photographed the ancient Hebrew text hammered into the metal. And strip by strip, they realized they had found something that deeply unsettled them. The locations appeared to reference real places, real landmarks. The scroll did not read like mythology or religious symbolism. It read like an inventory written by someone who had buried something and expected it to be recovered. But here's where the story becomes truly strange. After translating the scroll, the research team went completely silent. No treasure hunts were organized. No expeditions were launched. The scroll was photographed, studied, and then nothing happened. Because the people who read it couldn't agree on what it actually said. The Hebrew used in the scroll was unusual, a mix of different dialects with strange abbreviations. Some locations mentioned in the text don't seem to exist anymore. Others are described using landmarks that disappeared 2,000 years ago. The measurements don't match any known ancient system. The directions lead to places now under buildings, roads, or military zones. But that's the official explanation. In 1967, just after the Six-Day War, access to research related to the Copper Scroll became significantly more restricted. Israeli authorities placed tighter controls on translations, notes, and archival materials connected to the scroll. When journalists asked why, a government official gave a careful answer. The scroll's contents could cause problems for national security and regional stability. Think about that. A 2,000-year-old treasure map considered a national security concern. Here's what some researchers believe that explanation deliberately avoids. The Copper Scroll doesn't just list gold and silver. It mentions holy vessels, temple items, and garments of the high priest. If those items were ever found and proven real, it would address one of history's most explosive religious questions. What happened to the treasures of Solomon's temple? That answer could reopen conflicts that have burned for thousands of years. What if the governments, churches, and organizations that claim to know where it is are refusing to prove it for a reason? What if the pattern of silence isn't ignorance but protection? If this investigation opened your mind, like this video right now, subscribe to Hidden Reality. Share this with someone who still questions what we've been told. Because some mysteries demand to be buried, and some doors were sealed by people who understood far more than we ever will.